Only Murders in the Building is back this week with the 8th installment in Season 4. Sticking to the theme of being named after famous movies, this episode was titled Lifeboat, which is an Alfred Hitchcock movie from the 1940s where a group of people are forced to survive on a lifeboat. With the lifeboat representing a group of strangers coming together and forging a family in order to do what they can to survive, it was a metaphorical analogy of the Arconia and Mabel, Charles and Oliver in the East Block, but also all of the individuals on the 14th floor of the West Block. New York City and dwindling dreams was the ocean that they were all drowning in, but together they found a way to survive as one. With us finding out what happened to Dudenoff and us also getting an insight into who could potentially be behind the killing of Sazz, let's jump into the video and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, Episode 8, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Why is Glen a prime suspect and can it be debunked? Right at the end of the episode, when Helga arrived in the East Tower, she was our ding-dong, the very thing that changes the course of the plot in a TV series, and it's usually within a soap opera. She revealed to the trio that she'd previously spoken with Sazz on the ham radio. And that Sazz mentioned how there was a stunt double that was working on a movie and that he was her protege. However, he'd messed up pretty badly and he was harassing her, leading her to say to Helga that he was dangerous and that he was going to be the death of her. But there are potentially a couple of different reasons as to why Glen could be after Sazz and also the group. The first is a theory that I mentioned a couple of episodes back where I thought that he could have been a suspect. When we were first introduced to Glen, we saw that he was a struggling individual and he'd been out of work for a while. This was because he was Ben Glenroy's stunt double, and obviously Ben was dead. With Ben dying inside of the Arconia, he could have held some resentment towards Charles, Mabel and Oliver, especially considering they were actually accused of being his killers at one point. Charles also had a long-running feud with Ben and he did physically attack him, so Glen may have blamed them for Ben dying, which ultimately had a knock-on effect to him no longer being as in demand at work and changing his life for the worse, something which could have made him want to seek revenge on that. With Sazz also being a stunt double to Charles, that may have put her on his list as well because he would have known that they were best friends. Or it could tie back to the original idea of Sazz being killed by mistake because they thought it was Charles. Whilst the show is pointing towards Glen being the suspect, I think this is the last red herring that they're going to be giving us as we embark onto the penultimate episode. I think Glen being the killer can quite easily be debunked. The first is that he obviously got hit on set and was present there in front of everybody, which meant that he didn't fire the weapon which was intended to hit Oliver. When the group started receiving text messages saying that they were being watched and with an image with a target on them, he was pretty much in a comatose state due to the injuries that he endured, so he wouldn't have been able to have sent it. Plus, we were told that the person who fired the weapon at Sazz was left-handed, and from what we've seen of Glen, he appears to be right-handed. This is due to the hand that he was eating the apple with when we first met him and the hand that he led with, so I really don't think that Glen killed Sazz. Unless he killed Sazz, but then there's another killer that's out there trying to kill the trio, but if that's the case then I think it's just going to get way too complicated. The thing that I find most interesting is the fact that Dudenoff's body was incinerated in the incinerator in the exact same way that Sazz's body was. It's almost like they knew what to do because it had been done before. I know we've cleared the Westies of murdering Dudenoff, but it's rather suspicious that Sazz's body was disposed of in the exact same way. I still think there's something suspicious going on there. The way that Mabel did something good for them as well, in not splitting up the family as she said. I think there's still a sinister secret that lies within the heart of that group and somebody could be involved. Something that will make Mabel regret not dobbing them in. Let's remember as well, Vince was involved in acting and so was Rudy. So could the story that they told be an elaborate cover-up and they're just channeling their acting skills? Acting, stuntmen and the shooting of a movie, it's been very focused around that kind of industry, so it would make a topical twist. What happened to Dudenoff? Well, it turned out that Dudenoff was in fact dead, but he wasn't murdered. He actually ended things for himself. We saw that Dudenoff was a man in mourning following the death of his wife, and following her death, he rented out the apartments that they both bought for a cheap amount to the residents on the 14th floor. Because not only did he want to help them find and achieve their dreams, but he found himself living lonely on that floor. Over time, when he and his wife would purchase an apartment there, it would just sit there empty, and at that point he was all alone and didn't want to become the lonely old man. It was only at the end of the episode where we saw that the group were cashing in on Dudenoff's checks because he said to them that he wanted them to lie and say that he moved to Portugal so that they wouldn't lose the apartments following him dying, and the cast of people in his movie, which were the residents on the 14th floor, end up being separated. So that was why they were partaking in doing that. Dudenoff was dying, and he didn't want this newfound family to be split up. When it came to why his bone replacement was present in the incinerator, Dudenoff found out that he only had a few months to live, and rather than slowly die, he chose to end things for himself and asked them to burn him in the incinerator so there was no trace of him. So technically, they did partake in illegal activities, but they just weren't responsible for his murder. My review of the episode. I thought this was an okay episode of the show. It was relatively contained. Do I think it's the best? No, not by any means. This episode was mainly focused on the death of Dudenoff and clearing that case up, rather than the killing of Sazz and the fact that the trio had been threatened. I'm not gonna lie, we're embarking towards the end of the season, and if I'm being honest, I don't think this season is doing it for me as much as the previous one. I feel like there's been a few episodes now where not much has really developed on in terms of the case, and it's not necessarily dragging the story out. But with episodes being so short and us having to wait a week each time, it's making it feel like we barely get anything at all when an episode airs. I feel like the last good episode was probably episode 6. From a stylistic approach, I actually think it's the nicest season that we've had, so I'm not knocking it there. This season feels like it's taken a large bite in terms of the plot and the different layers that it's got. It's still chewing away and it's slowly getting there, but it's just taking its time. I don't feel the suspense as much in this season, nor do I feel like I've got as many suspects in my head as I did the last time round when season 3 was being aired. We're about to embark onto the penultimate episode and we still don't really even know what the motive of the killer was to get Sazz, and also why the trio are being hunted other than the fact that the person wants them to stop their podcast. I just feel it's all being left quite last minute. As per usual, the trio were on top form in terms of their chemistry, and there were definitely some funny moments that were embedded throughout it. I thought the connection to the movie Lifeboat was a nice touch, and it was one of the show's better approaches at connecting to existing features. The symbolism of it representing the strangers all coming together at once and discovering a family in each other and looking to just survive was a good metaphor, and I thought it perfectly summed up both sides of the Arconia, even though there was a divide there. With the next episode being titled Escape from Planet Klongo, this will be the first time in this season that an episode isn't going to be based on a real movie. When searching online, there's no movie with that title, so I wonder if it's going to be some kind of parody of the 1971 movie Escape from the Planet of the Apes, as that's the closest thing I can think of with a title focused around escaping from a planet. Either way, I'm intrigued to see where it's going to be going. The season finale is named My Best Friend's Wedding, which is also after a movie, so it's clear to see that Oliver and Loretta's wedding is going to be taking center stage, and maybe an attempted murder could take place when everybody's gathered inside of the Arconia. So, there you have it, Only Murders in the Building Season 4 Episode 8, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on Only Murders in the Building, then click on the card in the top corner, there's an entire playlist there. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.